Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our special coverage on the Gaza shelling. The shelling that started on August 1st by Israeli in a flashpoint Palestinian town in the West Bank, in the space of just a few days, took on the trappings of a full-blown conflict and deadly scenes. By Sunday night, the death toll on the Palestinian side had soared to 44, including 16 children, when an Egyptian rocket surprise truce brought welcome relief to the Gaza Strip's war-weary population. The target of the Israeli shelling was the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group, but the goal of a quick, clean war causing maximum damage to the PIJ with minimal civilian suffering and confined to just the Gaza Strip could yet elude Israel if the ceasefire deal falls through. On Saturday, flames poured out of a building in Gaza City after an Israeli airstrike, while wounded Palestinians were evacuated by medics. Gaza's health ministry reported that a 5-year-old girl targeted by the Israeli occupation was among those killed. In light of the Israeli occupation regime's brutal actions and crimes in areas of the occupied West Bank, Palestinian groups have declared Friday as the Day of Anger in condemnation of the crimes perpetrated by the occupation regime. The Palestinian news agency Wafa reported Thursday that dozens of Palestinians had been injured during clashes with Israeli forces. The Israeli military arrested 11 Palestinians in the West Bank and Al-Quds. They have also demolished houses. To discuss more the situation in Gaza, I am joined live here in studio by Mr. Monsef Boudarba, an economic expert and the president of Algerian Ceramic Association, and our own journalist Hassan Barkan, along via Skype with Tariq Abu Azoum, a Palestinian activist from Gaza. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. The discussion right after this. And before we delve into discussion, here's what's on tap today. On Friday, the occupied Palestinian territories witnessed a day of public outrage, condemning the Zionist aggression against Palestinians and rejecting the assassinations and arrests carried out by the occupying army against the Palestinian people. The coordinator of Palestinian forces and factions, Wassal Abu Yusuf, said that the purpose of organizing the Day of Palestinian Anger was to reaffirm the unity of the Palestinian class in the face of occupation. All right, let's kick it up with you, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum, since you're at the heart of the event. What can you tell us more about this day and what it symbolizes?
Well, actually, thank you so much for hosting me today. Palestinians probably came out from a very devastating war in which the Israeli occupation rained bombs and rockets over Palestinian civilian heads and over the Gaza Strip generally, in which around 47 Palestinians were killed, including 16 children and hundreds others wounded. Actually, year after year, the Gaza Strip has been subjected to different kinds of horrific operations and military attacks carried out by the Israeli occupation against the civilians in the Gaza Strip, in which thousands of Palestinians were killed and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were other injured. Besides, the civil infrastructure has been totally destroyed. Actually, this day symbolizes probably the great outrage processed among Palestinian civilians and among Palestinians generally in the Gaza Strip and in the Western Bank in particular, and in which they are rejecting the Israeli crimes against Palestinians, and they are trying to call the international community to stop the Israeli provocations against Palestinians there, because Israel did not even respect the principles of the international law to stop their violations. And actually, regarding the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, life has not been so much easy for them during the last couple of years. Actually, with each aggression, with each attack, and even with each military campaign carried out by the Israeli occupation, the situation become much deteriorating and much complex. Actually, people in the Gaza Strip here are trying to recover from the Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip, and even they are trying to recover from the many injuries, actually physically and mentally, that they really have sustained. And actually, Palestinians are trying to call the international world and the international community to stop the Israeli crimes and the Israeli systematic process of imposing such huge threats of the Palestinian lives. And we Palestinians in the Gaza Strip here clearly understand that we are not Ukrainians to receive the sufficient support as Ukrainian did. And after the eruption of the Israeli aggression of the Gaza Strip, and even in the Israeli provocation in the West Bank, the international community once again did what it really does best, which is to provide Israel with the full legitimacy of its attack against Palestinians. So Palestinians are organizing these marches and these protests to express their refusal and their disapproval for all the Israeli sinister schemes to threaten the Palestinian life and to eliminate the Palestinian dream of building their independent state.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum. And I would like to ask this question to Mr. Monsef. Mr. Monsef, I know that you're an economic expert. Perhaps I'm going to drag you today to talk a little about politics. Yeah. As a person, Mr. Monsef, how did you find the aggression against the Palestinians, these recent shellings against the Palestinians? Of course, the pretext was that they were targeting certain goals, but we all know it. Civilians were targeted. How did you find it, first impression?
Okay, let me tell you first that this is not the first time. So this is a remake. And we are facing a very crucial situation in that region in the occupied territory in West Bank or Gaza, because since early 80s, when the Stone Revolution started, and the Palestinian cause was, let's say, into level of communication, worldwide communication. So now is the problem of the conflict is related to two things. First, the Palestinian struggle for their independence, political independence and economical independence. And the second thing is related to the internal policy in Israel. So when we analyze what is happening in different several revolutions that started, or let's say movement in the Palestinian side, it has a connection with the Israeli policy, because I think the problem is what we call in international law or international relation the two-speed conflict, which means that for some reasons the international law is always applied and reinforced by the stronger. So this is a typical case, an example. We can, in the international relation, when we can see that the strong side is always right against the weak side. We also, the third point that is very important in this occupied Palestinian conflict is that what is happening related to Algerian foreign policy. As you may know, what happened in the month, 30 days ago, the Algerian president has unified the Palestinian parties and with the PLO, which is the leader in the Palestinian cause. So I think is also a message for the Algerian policy to be very careful, because as Algeria makes a move, is always related to the region, is sometimes a misinterpretation from different part of the conflicts. So I think this is the time to see what until which level the Palestinian people are willing to go, and see if the international law will take care of this problem or not. So it's an exam. It's an exam again. The Palestinian people are used to it, and for some reasons they get succeed for their cause, but it's not enough. Now you have to go in the field and see what's happened in the future.
Absolutely. What about you, Hussam Burkan, since you've been following the story recently and you have done or conducted some research, could you tell us about your own observations and the pretext that Israel used while attacking civilians?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Karim. So regarding the pretext used by the Zionist entity, they've always said that they're attacking Gaza and they're attacking Palestinian people, and the pretext was that self-defense. All the time they're saying self-defense. What we all know, as you just mentioned, Karim, is that they are targeting civilians. And when you say self-defense, when you say the balance of power, and you say that when you see that the Zionist entity has one of the strongest armies in the world and has the latest technologies, cutting-edge technologies, and you see the other side, which is Gaza and Palestinians fighting using stones. Where is the self-defense here? How can you say self-defense? Another point is that they are saying self-defense against whom, Karim? Here with me, I have some pictures of kids. 16 kids, Karim. They have been killed, they've been murdered, starting with Ala Abdullah. She's a 5-year-old girl. And according to her mom, she was just playing in the garden. She was not attacking anybody, and she doesn't even know why she has been murdered with cold blood. We have 16 kids, Karim, 16 kids. In just 3 days, they've killed and murdered with cold blood 16 kids. We have Jamil Najm, 5 years old. Also Hazim Muhammad, all innocent kids. And they've been killed, and they don't even know what they've been killed. And then they say that this was for self-defense. We make no mistake, Karim, there is no self-defense. They targeted civilians, and international community should respond just as they responded to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We need the response of the international community.
And Mr. Mosif, do you think this is really possible, that we are going to see a reaction from the international community? And knowing that this is not the first crime that Israel has committed. I mean, for all these years, so many crimes were committed by Israel, but then nobody held it accountable for its crimes.
No, the international community always responds. In the United Nations, let's say, the forum where this takes place, by making resolutions against Israel. But the problem with the response, the international law is not applied. That is the problem. When it comes to Israel, it's very complicated because the international relations does not function with the same rules when it comes to Israel. So I don't think the international community will resolve the problem. The problem has to be resolved by negotiation again. And unfortunately, when the negotiations start to organize itself, we have this kind of situation happening every time. It's to make the temperatures goes high and to put Israel in a stronger position for the negotiation. So it's all strategic. The UN has a role. The human rights organization, they have a role also. But let me tell you today, unfortunately, the role is very limited in terms of efficacy. So what is important is to expect some big regional country like Saudi Arabia or Egypt and of course Algeria, since now the president has put the Algerian foreign policy in a leadership position in this issue, in the Palestinian cause. So I think maybe there will be some talks, and because what is important is the ceasefire, and to stop what is happening. This is the first step before anything else, before the UN resolution or what else that can be applied or Israel can be punished or not, is the ceasefire. If we get the ceasefire, then we open the negotiation with regional countries that are surrounding the region. And of course, Algeria has an important role in this issue. And I hope the international community will help all this to get together.
Absolutely. And Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum, as you have been listening to our distinguished guest and our own journalist, what else can you add regarding this issue? I mean, whenever we talk about Israel, international community is afraid of being called anti-Semitic, for example, and nobody is actually trying to hold it accountable. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, how do you see the internal front in Palestine? Do you think it is united enough to go through and push through something really solid?
Well, I really appreciate what your honorable guests say right now, but actually what they really don't know is that Israel did not really commit to any accord or negotiation made with the PLO or even with the Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip. And all the time they try to prick all the ceasefire that has been made under international mediation and under international supervision. And even did not even respect the Egyptian mediation during the last war, which has been erupted in the Gaza Strip. Actually, the international community played a very good role regarding Palestinians, but as your honorable guest say, it is limited. But actually, when it comes to Israel, the situation becomes so complex for them to play such a vital role in that. And what is the most important thing is that all the time Israel is trying to challenge and to defy the international law. And even before a couple of hours, they have assassinated a famous and prominent Palestinian journalist, Trina Al Jazeera reporter in the Gaza Strip and in the occupied Palestinian territories in 1948 lands. Even it was reporting the Israeli ongoing crime, and she was wearing the press vest and helmet. Even Israel did not respect the ethics of journalism, and they even assassinated with a cold blood. And actually, the international community did not really afford such a good protection even for journalists. What about the civilians? The civilians who are just disarmed and living peacefully in their houses while they are witnessing and watching the Israeli bombs and rockets fall over the heads. Actually, this is literally a crime against humanity. And Palestinian here in the Gaza Strip, if you just follow the Palestinian local media outlets, you'll find out the Palestinians are frustrated and depressed from the role of the international community, that they don't have protection like other occupied nations around the world. And Palestinians are trying to gather themselves and to pull themselves together in order to fight and to stand firm against the Palestinian, against the Israeli crimes and the Israeli terrorism properly. And even in spite of the great losses Palestinians incurred during the last Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip, but they have such an outstanding ability to pull themselves together in order to say no for the Israeli crimes, and even to send a message to the international world that Palestinians, in spite of all drastic situation, economic, social, and even political situation that they are living, they are trying to stand firm and unite in their response against the Israeli crimes.
Very nice indeed, thank you. And in related news, over half a century of Israel's aggression, it remains a major obstacle to the availability, accessibility, and quality of healthcare for Palestinians in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. Restricted freedom of movement due to the checkpoints, the separation wall, a constrictive regime of permits, and the blockade of closure of Gaza means that patients across the occupied Palestinian territory often struggle to get the treatment and the care they need. The movement of medical professionals seeking to train and improve their skills and vital medical equipment deemed a risk to Israel's security are often also restricted by the occupation. So let me get back to you, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum. How is life going on now in Gaza after 3 days of deadly conflict, and that resulted in the death of more than 45 innocent, among them 16 children? And is there any humanitarian aid that is being donated right now? Can you bring us to the latest on the ground?
Well, actually, after the end of the Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip, the humanitarian international agencies and different Arabian organizations and institutions sent an immediate and urgent aid for Palestinians in order to try to mitigate the level of oppression and even the level of suffering that Palestinians are become witnessing after the Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. Actually, the United Nations is trying to send such a permanent aid for Palestinians. Even the Qatari Red Cross sent aids for humanitarian aids for the Gaza Strip, and even most of the European countries are trying to send kind of aid for Palestinians in order to try to tackle the severity that Palestinians are witnessing right now. Actually, Palestinians, after the end of the last Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip, they are witnessing such a very drastic economic situation, which was already fragile even due to the Israeli previous shellings and bombardments against civilian infrastructure and even economic facilities here in the Gaza Strip. And actually, we can probably list from the previous Israeli escalation and aggression on the Gaza Strip that they are trying to persevere and to make sure that the Palestinians will keep suffering from the hard economic consequences after the end of each war, because they would like to make Palestinians busy with their eternal economic situation, rather than concentrate concentrating on fighting and even to facing and decriminalizing the Israeli occupation in front of the international community. And even the economic situation here in the Gaza Strip become a little bit frustrating and deteriorating after the Israeli occupation. Most of the Palestinian residential houses, around more than 260 residential units, were critically destroyed due to the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip. This is according to the Palestinian Ministry of Labor here in the Gaza Strip. And they are trying to send their calls for the international community to carry out such a very urgent rehabilitation process for all the destroyed houses, because now Palestinians whose houses were completely destroyed are displaced, they are homeless, and they are living in shelters. So they are waiting just an aid from the international community. While the Israeli occupation, they are trying to exert pressure on Palestinians, and they are trying to traumatizing the Palestinian in the Gaza Strip in order to break the will to struggle against the Israeli occupation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum, and I direct this question to you, Mr. Munsif. Since you're an economic expert, what can you tell us about the already dire economic situation in Gaza? After such airstrikes, the repercussions could be even worse. What could officials there do in order perhaps to lessen this dire situation on the citizens?
Yeah, this is the problem. Israel does not recognize the elections in that territory. That they do not recognize a party that can win free and transparent elections like it happened. They rejected the result of the elections. They said, no, we only talk with PLO. When it comes to PLO, they signed agreements. They signed an agreement, the Oslo Accord. So, but nobody respects that. Today, where is the Oslo Accord? Why they don't accept that other parties, democratic parties, get involved and takes, elections, get deputy, get measures? Why not? The Palestinians are a very democratic society. They have a pluralism, different political parties. So this is understandable, and we cannot understand that. But for the Israeli, they use this pretext for international relations. When they expose the problem of the West Bank or Gaza, they say, no, these people are terrorists. These people are not terrorists. These people are well representative of the people. They were elected freely, and the election, the UN went there, the European community went there during the elections, and then they say, no, they have to stop the elections. So I don't think there will be an agreement very soon, except if Israel accepts the variety of the political parties that are today. The people in Palestine, they have the right to choose their leaders, like in other democratic country. So this is the first point. The second point, economically, it's very difficult to evaluate now, the damages in the economic point of view. We will have, the results, let's say the exam of what is really happening there in a few days. And but let me tell you something. The Palestinian people are used to live under such a pressure. They are used to, the economy is very prepared for that. So when the ceasefire will come, and I hope it will be the soonest, the better, I think the Palestinian people economy and the Palestinians will take over again on their future. I have no doubt about that. And I think the Palestinians, they have the right to live in their territory, and they have the right to choose their own representative, like in all the country in the world. Know why for Israel is acceptable and why is not acceptable for Palestine. So there is no issue. So I think one day this thing has to finish. Absolutely. And Palestine has to recover their independence, no matter what happened. And this is our will.
And by independence, what do we mean exactly, Mr. Munsif Boudarba? Since we see that what's on the table is the two-state solution. And then we see that there is no real political will in order to solve the situation. It's been for several millennia right now.
No,
and then,
the two-state solution is the most acceptable solution by the international community. The big powers are ready to go for that. But Israel will not accept that because in the field, in the region, there is a problem of demography. The Palestinians are more than the Israelis. So one day the Israelis, they will say, no, we don't accept the two-state separation. So it will be very difficult for the Palestinians to have their independence the way the international community wants this to happen. So I don't know. I hope one day the Israeli politics will change and will accept to live side by side with a Palestinian independent state. Of course, I hope this will happen very soon for the Palestinians and for the whole region.
Hopefully. And Mr. Hussam Burkan, the Zionists did not only target, let's say, civilians or people, but they also targeted very important infrastructure in the Gaza Strip that actually could affect the economy. How can this happen, actually? Can you highlight what is the most important infrastructure that was targeted and why?
Exactly. So, Karim, when it comes to economy, as you just mentioned, the Zionist entity did not attack only civilians. They destroyed really crucial and important infrastructure, talking about hospitals, schools, and also they attacked areas, agricultural areas, Karim. Can you imagine this? This is like a proof that they were not just attacking specific targets. When you burn fields of grapes and oil and olives, like, how can you say that you're just having specific targets? And the latest reports just released.
They want the people to live.
Exactly.
That's the policy.
Exactly.
It's la terre brûlée.
Not only this. So the latest report said that the estimated damage of agriculture is about $1 million, Karim. Can you imagine this? $1 million when it comes to agriculture. And talking about urbanism and infrastructure, also there is a report saying that in order to rebuild what the Zionist entity destroyed, Gaza needs about $1 billion to rebuild Gaza and to rebuild the infrastructure, damaged infrastructure. And also I want to comment on what we've been just talking about killing civilians and the population that is more. We have more population Palestinian than Zionist. The thing is that's not a war, Karim. Make no mistake. That's ethnic cleansing. They want to destroy and clean anything that is Palestinian. They don't accept Palestine. They don't accept the concept of Palestine, and they don't accept the existence of Palestinians. So we need to emphasize on this. And what we need also is from international organizations and associations to document the crimes that are happening right now. Because when it comes to international law and international organizations, they need documents, they need proofs. And in order to do this, these organizations need to document everything. We live in the era of technology and communication. We're taking pictures. Everything was documented using their phones. So we need to emphasize on this. This is a call for all international organizations and NGOs in Gaza Strip and in the Palestinian occupied territories to document everything, because the people who are responsible,
the lack of proof,
the
Mr.
people,
Hussam.
The people who are responsible needs to.
We have satellite images. If they wanted to bring proofs to the table, they could have done that so easily, but then there is no will. And here I would like to ask the final question to Mr. Tariq Azoum. Mr. Tariq Azoum, or Abu Azoum, could you tell us about your own stand in this? Are you optimistic about the two-state solution? Do you think that the Palestinians will soon see a victory over having their own state?
Well, actually, throughout the last couple of decades, the Israeli occupation tried to intensify the level of pressure on Palestinians to accept every single request or, let's say, solution imposed by Israel, which can serve its own interest, by the way. Actually, this is a Palestinian complete land from the river to the sea, and the Palestinians, they have their own right in this country. Actually, Israel has occupied Palestine in 1948, and they have committed hundreds and thousands of massacres against Palestinians, and they have displaced our ancestors from our occupied territories. Actually, I'm from the Palestinian village of Palmyra, and I was displaced from my town, and I'm currently living here in the Gaza Strip. So actually, there are a lot of Israeli settlements have been built on my original town and our occupied territories in 1948. And actually, I am really supporting Palestinians and their struggles against the Israeli occupation, and they were trying to retrieve our basic rights that we were deprived from by the Israeli occupation. And even there is such a huge diplomatic effort by the Israeli Foreign Ministry to criminalize Palestinians in front of the international community, and they are trying to change facts and to alter the Palestinian real face in front of the international and foreign speakers and foreign people abroad. Palestinians even, they are trying to even call the Israeli occupation to have the two-state solution, but even Israel refused this, and because they would like to have they even refuse the coexistence with Palestinians. They are trying to exert pressure on Palestinians, and they would like to systematically control all Palestine from the river to the sea. Actually, this is a crime against humanity, and this is a crime against Palestinian people, the original citizens, the original residents of Palestine. And Israel, they are trying even to commit different kinds of crimes against the historical or the history of Palestine, and they're trying to change the fact. So even Israel did not even respect to any proposal had been imposed and even suggested by the international community. So what they really want is that they would like to eliminate Palestinians from Palestine. They would like to control everything of Palestine. They'd like to get useful from every benefit or every probably source of wealth or source of, let's say, prosperity for Palestinians. And as you can probably see, especially in the Gaza Strip, even if they are calling for two-state solution, or even they are trying to call or promote for the coexistence, how can you promote for coexistence and meanwhile you are trying to kill Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? You are killing children. You cannot really differentiate between a militant, a military person and a civilian person. Actually, this all Israel has a state of contradiction between what they really try to promote in front of the international community and what is practically try to carry out on the ground. So what I'm sure about is that Israel is trying to eliminate the Palestinian even a dream and the Palestinian willingness to establish their independent state.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum. You were live with us from Palestine. I would like to thank the guest with me here in studio, Mr. Musa Boudarba. Thank you so much for being with us. Hassan Barkan, thank you so much for your clarifications. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our special coverage for today comes to a close. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.